Hello and welcome. This is week 5. Today is Wednesday, November 4th. This is 108W weekly video for week 5. I did not post a weekly video at the end of last week because as we decided, as everybody knows, we decided to cancel class for this week, the week of the election. There was just too much going on. Things were too crazy and too stressful, and we made that decision. I want to thank you. First of all, I want to thank Pablo for helping me make that decision. But I also want to thank many of you who wrote to me over the last several days and expressed your thanks and let me know that we had made the right decision in doing that. I know that many of you have been involved in what's been going on over the past week in the election or other related political events. And just in this time, I think it was really the right thing to do. But we do need to get back to work next week. And so next week we will do assignment number 5, even though it will be week 6. And so this is bumping everything back a week. So what's going to happen is we'll do assignment number 5 next week, week 6. We'll do assignment number 6 the following week, week 7. Week 8, we will take the entire week off. That's Thanksgiving week. There'll be no discussion sections, no pod meetings, no assignments, no weekly videos. You have the week of Thanksgiving off. Enjoy it. Week 9 will come back. We'll do assignment number 7, and that'll be it for the quarter. Week 10, we won't have a new assignment, but if any of you got an unsatisfactory or weren't able to turn one of your assignments in, then you can make it up, make one assignment up that week, week 10. Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about assignment number 5, because it's going to be a little bit different than the ones we've done in the past. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the theme. First thing I want to say is that this is usually the last assignment for the quarter. It was actually supposed to be assignment number 8, but I bumped it up to assignment number 5 because I kind of figured a lot of us have probably been attached to our screens for the past week or maybe longer with everything that's been going on. And I thought it might be time to do something maybe a little bit more fun. And so I wanted to take the assignment that I usually give at the very end of the quarter and move it up to this coming week. So weekly assignment number 5 is going to be a little bit different. There will only be 2 activities. So one is a video and one is an article, an academic article. And so I want you to read the article and to watch the video. And then there is a project. And the project is based on the theme of urban wildlife. I'll tell you about the project in a second, but before I do that, I want to tell you why I'm talking about urban wildlife now. For most of the history of ecology and conservation, people interested in wildlife didn't think much about animals in cities. There weren't that many animals in most cities, and the people that study animals, ecologists and wildlife biologists, didn't think those creatures or their habitats were very interesting. They were the common creatures that you see everywhere that are not rare or particularly enlightening in terms of what they could tell us about ecology and evolution. Over the past 20 years or so, that's changed pretty dramatically, though. Now, the field of urban ecology is one of the most rapidly growing fields in the discipline of ecology and biology more broadly. And it's attracted a huge number of young researchers who have studied urban wildlife and urban ecosystems, and as a result, shown that cities can actually be really interesting and important places to do ecology and conservation. I got on this bandwagon myself about 4 or 5 years ago, and I spent about the last 4 years working on a project that I've actually just almost finished now. It's a book. It's about the history of wildlife in American cities. It's called The Accidental Ecosystem: People and Wildlife in American Cities. And I now have a full draft of the book. And so I'm going to be revising it and hopefully getting it out into publication in 2021. So over the past few years, as I was studying this topic, so many interesting things came to light. It turns out that wildlife in cities are really interesting for a bunch of different reasons. One reason is that they can tell us a lot about evolution, because cities tend to be places where there are intense selective pressures where evolution can occur rapidly. They tell us a lot about how people interact with wild animals. They tell us about how wild animals interact in novel environments that have been created from scratch and that provide opportunities for some and disadvantages for others. I think the most important thing that I learned in the 4 years where I was researching and writing this book, which I still am technically writing, is that if you look at cities today, cities particularly in North America, Europe, parts of East Asia, they actually have more wild animals, particularly large and charismatic wild animals, living in them right now, today, than most of those cities have had for at least the past 150 years. People who live in cities in North America, Europe, and parts of East Asia, like I said, are living around and sharing their habitats, their urban habitats, with more wild animals than people in those cities have for at least 150 years in many areas. Yet this has been happening at the same time that, as you know, around the world, wildlife has been largely in decline. As you know, we're in the sixth mass extinction, and extinction rates and wildlife declines have accelerated dramatically over the past half century or so, even as the number and diversity of animals in many of our cities has increased. And so what's going on? That's actually the motivating question of my book. But what I learned in studying this, excuse me, is that wildlife came back to cities not because of something that people did on purpose. People didn't go out saying, we should have a mountain lion in our city, or we should have more raccoons in our city, or we should have more deers grazing on a golf course. That didn't happen. What happened instead is that wildlife came back to many cities because of decisions that people made for other reasons. People planted trees because they thought it was good for human health and raised property values and saved energy, right? They created parks because they thought it would be good for exercise and for public education and for civic mindedness and to prevent cities from boiling over in protest and strife. So a lot of things happened in cities that people did for other reasons that ended up attracting wildlife and creating the urban ecosystems we have today that have so many wild creatures in them. So in a way, wildlife came back to many of our cities by accident, right? Not an accident that they made, but an accident that we did. But then the challenge has been how to coexist with them once they got here. So getting them back was actually the easy part, which is not the case with most conservation activities. But living with them once they've returned has been the hard part. So that's what my book is about. That's what my work has been about in this area over the past few years. What you're going to do over this next week for your project, and this is fun and exciting, is you're going to create your own field guide to wildlife in your city, wherever you happen to be. If you're in Isla Vista right now, you do it in IV. If you're in Santa Barbara, you do it in Santa Barbara. If you're at home in Fresno or Los Angeles or in Oakland or someplace like that, you do it there. You can do it in any area. If you're out in the middle of the country at home, let's say if you live on a farm or a ranch, I'd like you to maybe visit a nearby town and see what you see there. And so what I want you to do is to grab your camera, grab your notebook, and grab a pen, and head out into the field in an urban area. It can be any field site, like I said, in any city where you happen to be. And what I want you to do there is I want you to identify and take a photo of, hopefully. It doesn't have to be a professional quality photo. I know that's really hard to do, but just to document that you did it. 3 different species of wildlife in that urban area. Take photographs of each and then observe what's happening around them. So what time of day is it? What kind of environment are you in? Are you in a really urban area with lots of big tall buildings and streets? Are you in a park? Are you in a suburb? Are you by a creek? Are you in a hilly area with lots of native vegetation like oak trees on the hillsides? Where are you? What kind of environment are you in? Notice anything important about the habitat and the ecological context. Note the animal. Then go home and do some research on it. Get online. Try to learn about it. Maybe it's a crow. Maybe it's a sea lion. Maybe it's probably not a mountain lion. You're probably not going to see a mountain lion, but maybe it's a bobcat. Maybe it's a kind of bird that you're unfamiliar with that you saw for the first time and you want to get a photo of and look it up. So go ahead and do that. Get online, figure out what the species is, and learn some things about it. On your assignment, you'll be asked some questions, and then you'll be given some instructions for how to make a field guide. I've also provided you with a link on page 2 of your assignment of a sample field guide that you can look at online if you're not used to working with a field guide or reading them or don't really know what one looks like. This gives you kind of an example of that. You can also go to a bookstore or something, but remember to be careful, mask up, social distance, all that, if you do go out and go to a bookstore. You can also just, of course, get online and look for field guides and look through them online. Then what I want you to do is I want you to create your own field guide for these 3 species in this environment. And so you can do it in a variety of different forms. It has to be digital because you have to be able to submit it to Pablo remotely. In years past, it could be digital or it could be a hard copy. People did posters, they did PowerPoint presentations, they did booklets. Yours has to be digital ultimately, but you could start off doing it actually freehand if you'd like, and then take photos of that or scan that. But you need to produce a field guide. Take your time with it, enjoy it, make it artistic, make it fun. If you have a skill, if you're a photographer, that's great. If you're interested in film, do a short documentary film. Make yourself your own David Attenborough, a famous wildlife documentary filmmaker. Produce it. If it's a digital product online, like a film, you need to post it online so that we can view it, and you need to send the link to Pablo. If it's another kind of thing, like a PowerPoint presentation, or if it's in Word, or if it's another kind of a document like a PDF, then you can submit it through the normal way that you would submit your assignments online through GauchoSpace. Either way, you need to do that. Then what you'll do is you'll come into your pod and you'll answer a couple questions in the pod. Essentially, you'll go around, people will talk about the animals they saw, what they learned about them, and then you'll zoom back a little bit and say, what does this tell us about urban wildlife? What can we learn given what we heard in Professor Alagona's weekly video, what we learned about in the couple activities we did, and what we saw in the field and the research we did at home, and then the discussion we had in the pod. The point of all this is to get you to think not only about exotic wildlife. Conservationists often focus on big exotic things, that live far away, right? What I want you to do is to think a little bit more about the creatures that we share our habitats with, that we live with, whose lives we affect, and that affect our lives in return. We all live in habitats, we all live in ecosystems. We don't always think of it that way every day, but we do. We know from the coronavirus pandemic that we exchange microbes, we exchange pathogens, we share habitats with other animals, even if we live in the most urban of areas, especially today in the 21st century. So the purpose of this assignment is to get you to think about wildlife that we share our habitats with in the places where we live and work on a daily basis. Do the activities, go out in the field, go home, have some fun with this, produce your field guide, and then hopefully you'll come out of this week having a little bit greater appreciation of the creatures that we share our habitats with, and the very fact that we all, no matter where we all live in a habitat, we all live in an ecosystem. With that, I want to thank you again for all of your hard work, for sticking with us through this quarter, despite all the headwinds, despite all the challenges we're facing. Pablo has been giving me fantastic feedback on the work that you're doing. I'm really proud of you. I've enjoyed meeting a lot of you in your in the office hours, and I had a fantastic time talking with the author Ben Goldfarb and the rest of you. We had perfect attendance for the author discussion a week ago. That was fantastic. And I just want to say that I wish we could do more this quarter. I wish we could be together. I wish we could be sinking our teeth into this material even more. But I'm happy with the way it's going. I appreciate the feedback, and I'm proud of you all for working as hard as you've worked. Take a look at the assignment. Let Pablo know if you have questions. He'll be communicating with you over the next week, and go out and do your wildlife field guide. And don't forget, the week after that is the second book club. So be sure to start reading Poached by Rachel Newer once you finish your urban wildlife field guide. Thanks a lot. Have a good evening and a good weekend. Bye-bye.